Esna is one of the cities of Qena Governorate and is situated on the west bank of the Nile, almost 55 to 60 kilometers south to Luxor. It was known in the ancient Egyptian texts as Iyonit and later as Ta-Senit or Senet or Senti. The determinative Ta was omitted, so in Coptic it became known in Upper Egypt dialect as Seni and in Lower Egypt Esni, then later in Arabic Esna. It's a name that's difficult to determine its meaning till now. In Ptolemaic language and especially in the writings of Ptolemy the Geographical, it was mentioned as Laton Polis or the city of Laton. As for Estrabon el Bonti in the Roman period, he wrote it Latopolis or the city of Latos, which is a type of Nile fish called the Nile perch. This fish was sacred by the locals here in the Ptolemaic period. They also revered the image of goddess Hathor with the head of the Latos fish. This type of fish is still known till today. Esna was the capital of the third nome of Upper Egypt nomes in the Ptolemaic period and remained throughout the Greek-Roman period. As for the capital, it was initially in the town of Nekhbit, which is called today El Kab. The city of Esna is known minimum since the 18th dynasty, especially in the yearbooks of Thutmose III. He mentioned taxes paid by Esna city. In the ancient times, the city enjoyed a flourishing economy because of its strategic location on the caravan route of the convoys, which went back and forth from Sudan, carrying the goods of that country. Its temple is a cause of its famosity now, being included in the touristic map of the visitors of Upper Egypt, and it was indeed what made it a religious center for the cult of Khnum, and thus acquired a prestigious place in the history of Egypt. The current temple of Esna belongs to the Greek-Roman period. It was consecrated for the cult of Khnum, one of the most famous gods of creation in ancient Egypt. His job was to form humans on the potter's wheel. One of the temple's texts described him as the one who builds the sky above its four columns and lifts it up from eternity. He was regarded with high respect in the regions close to Aswan as being the god of the first cataract, where he formed together with the two goddesses Satit and Anukit the triad of Elephantine. It's believed that the existing temple was built above the ruins of a temple that belongs to the 18th dynasty, as a cartouche bearing the name of King Thutmose III was found. The temple was rebuilt in the Sawian period, but the current one dates back to the Ptolemaic period, when it was reconstructed for the last time. As for the inscriptions, they date to the Roman period. The beginning of building the current temple was in the time of King Ptolemy VI, who ruled from 181 to 140 BC. His name is inscribed on the western wall of the temple. On the other hand, the outer walls of the Hall of Columns, which is the only remaining part of the temple, bear the names of these Roman emperors: Claudius from 41 to 54 AD, Vespasian from 69 to 79, Domitian from 81 to 96, Trajan from 98 to 117, and Hadrian from 117 to 138 AD. There are also names of emperors like Antonius Pius, who ruled between 138 to 161, and Marcus Aurelius from 161 to 180, and Codmos from 180 to 192, and also Septimus Severus from 193 to 198, and the famous Caracalla from 198 to 211, and finally Decius in 250 AD. The existing part of Esna Temple, which is visited today by tourists, was all what was excavated of the temple since 1842 by the governor Muhammad Ali. The purpose of the excavation wasn't the scientific research or the discovery, but it was to prepare a down-below storage place for gunpowder. As for the rest of the temple, it's still buried under the modern houses of Esna city. The apparent part of the temple represents a front rectangular hall that still holds an intact beautiful ceiling. The most significant architectural element which remained from this temple is the Hall of the Columns, which has 24 columns. It was built during the era of Emperors Claudius and Vespasian, and it represented the facade of the temple. The colonnade comprises a collection of reliefed scenes that are very important concerning the religion and creed within that time zone. Some of them relate to the festivals of God Khnum, the creator god, and goddess Neith, who was also considered a creator goddess, and some scenes have to do with the horoscope. The reliefs on the 24 columns are concerned with some of Esna festivals, like the Festival of Lifting Up the Sky, the Festival of Potter's Wheel, referring to creator god Khnum, and the Festival of the Struggle of Ra with mankind, and most importantly the festival of the journey of goddess Neith from Sais, arriving here in Esna. Each temple in Egypt is specialized with many characteristics which distinguish it from other temples and make it one of its kind, unmatched and absolutely amazing. The colonnade of Esna Temple comprises 24 giant columns, totally inscribed and colored. During the persecution of the Romans to the Coptics, they took refuge in the temple and used it as a housing area. During their stay, they lit fire for cooking and for heat. The black flames stuck on the walls, columns and ceiling, leaving a thick layer of carbon which concealed the beautiful colors behind. Today, the Ministry of Archaeology carries on a big restoration project aiming at removing the carbon layer carefully by expert Egyptian restorators and exposing the true authentic colors. In one of the restored scenes, we see the Roman emperor holding incense burners and welcomes the boat of goddess Neith on its arrival from Sais on the occasion of her festival, which was celebrated here in Esna Temple. The front of the boat has a female head of the goddess, who is a wife of God Khnum, here in the temple. The ceiling also suffered from the Coptic residential period here. Nevertheless, it still exists in a good condition. It's carried over 6 rows of columns. Each of them is composed of 4 columns, composing altogether 24 columns. The colonnade faces the Nile River towards the east, and it dates back to the era of the 4th Roman Emperor Claudius, who ruled from 41 to 54 AD. It was relieved throughout the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. The newest relief in this hall goes back to the era of Emperor Dakios in the middle of the 3rd century AD, and by that, Esna Temple is the temple that bears the newest and latest known hieroglyphic texts. The fact that adds historical importance to its fabulous artistic construction and reliefs. The existing part of Esna Temple, which is visited today by tourists, was all what was excavated of the temple since 1842 by the governor Muhammad Ali. The purpose of the excavation wasn't the scientific research or the discovery, but it was to prepare a down-below storage place for gunpowder. As for the rest of the temple, it's still buried under the modern houses of Esna city. The apparent part of the temple represents a front rectangular hall that still holds an intact beautiful ceiling. The most significant architectural element which remained from this temple is the Hall of the Columns, which has 24 columns. It was built during the era of Emperors Claudius and Vespasian, and it represented the facade of the temple. The colonnade comprises a collection of reliefed scenes that are very important concerning the religion and creed within that time zone. Some of them relate to the festivals of God Khnum, the creator god, and goddess Nit, who was also considered a creator goddess, and some scenes have to do with the horoscope. The reliefs on the 24 columns are concerned with some of Esna festivals, like the Festival of Lifting Up the Sky, the Festival of Potter's Wheel, referring to creator god Khnum, and the Festival of the Struggle of Ra with mankind, and most importantly the Festival of the Journey of goddess Nit from Sais, arriving here in Esna. Each temple in Egypt is specialized with many characteristics which distinguish it from other temples and make it one of its kind, unmatched and absolutely amazing. The colonnade of Esna Temple comprises a collection of important religious and ceremonial scenes. It was constructed by the 4th Roman Emperor Claudius in 41 AD, but was decorated in an on and off period during the 1st and 2nd century. The ceiling bears numerous celestial figures and the images of gods, as the Egyptians imagined them crossing the sky in their boats and following the sun while it crosses the sky from east to west. Amongst the strangest things is that the reliefs of Esna Temple present us with two of the creator gods. One is Khnum and the other is Nit. The texts describe God Khnum to be he who forms humans and brings gods to the world. He created big and small animals and fish and reptiles. He developed the fish treasure so that it nourishes humans. He planted vegetables in the fields and grew seeds which provide food to man and gods. Finally, he is the one who founded quarries in the heart of the desert. Goddess Nit is the lady of the great city Sais in the west of Delta. She was worshipped in Esna Temple as a second image of the creator god. She was described in the text and reliefs as follows: the queen of gods in heaven and on earth and the universe, the first goddess who arrived and came into being before those who ought to exist since the beginning. Besides Khnum and Nit, there was a number of gods worshipped in this temple. They are Neptu, the lady of the countryside, Menhid, the frightened lioness, the child Hekat, the crocodile Shema Nefer, and the lion Titus, who has a human head. Each of these gods and goddesses was worshipped according to certain rituals performed at certain dates and timings throughout the year. Their interesting group compose one of the unique elements of the temple, which makes it a very distinguished one amongst the Greek-Roman temples. If the reliefs of Dendera temple comprise the name of the 5th Roman Emperor Neron, here in Esna we find the names of many of the Roman emperors who lived in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. Amongst them is Septimus Severus and Julia Domna and her children during a trip to Egypt in the year 199 AD. After the death of the emperor, his children struggled with each other, and one of them, Caracalla, murdered his brother Geta, whose picture was obliterated and smashed all across the Roman Empire. In Esna temple, we see his figure erased and his names in the royal cartouches were smashed. In spite of the relevantly new reliefs, we find that the list of the gods' names didn't change, and the rituals weren't exchanged with newer ones, and the same type of offerings continued to be served. One of the most important rituals performed in the temple was a magic ritual. Its purpose was protection and the elimination of the enemies. It's a ritual which shows the traditional enemies of Egypt represented with birds and fish inside the fishing net. This ritual was relieved on the interior wall of the colonnade on the northern side. One of the attractive scenes is the abundance of reliefs inscribed on the walls of the columns. Above the ritual scenes, especially at the rear part, are scenes and texts composing a religious library relieved on stones. It explains the important festivals that were celebrated here in Esna, and the rituals and the hymns. The new studies of the late scientist Sir Sonron Lepsius of Esna Temple has contributed in recording a great side of the religious life of this part of Upper Egypt. In spite of the relatively small discovered area of Esna Temple, yet it had provided us with religious information which quantity and importance surpassed what great temples of the New Kingdom had offered. On the eastern outer wall of the temple, there is a record of all the festivals celebrated here throughout the whole year. For example, it states the events of a winter month as follows. The first day of the month is a celebration of the festival of Petah, the festival of elevating the sky, festival of Khinum, festival of Ra, Lord of Esna, the unity with the sun disk, and the setting up of the potter's wheel. On the 10th and the 11th days, there are the festivals of the Transfiguration in the procession of Khinum, and the appearance of Jehuti in the procession of Shu, Tefnut, and Khinum. The 14th day is the Transfiguration of Khinum in the Temple of Khinum, and the purification with water and burning incense. Esna Temple is distinguished with the beauty of its composite capitals, which join between floral and decorative elements. Some of them have statues of the hoopoe and the grasshopper above them. Amongst the important scenes on the walls here is a repetitive scene of the crocodile Sobek on one side and God Khnum on the other side. There is also the ritual of the foundation of the temple, the ritual of the king leaving his palace and entering the temple, the celestial scenes of the 360 days of the year represented in 36 boats sailing in the sky, the scene of hunting bad spirits where the kings and the gods drag a net filled with birds and animals and fish and present them to God Khnum. Finally, there are the magnificent scenes of a group of Roman emperors presenting offerings to the Egyptian gods. All these scenes contribute in putting Esna Temple in a unique level amongst the temples of Egypt.